My parents secretly sold my inheritance. They forgot one document. I never imagined the people who taught me to trust would be the first to betray me. When I received a call from a stranger saying my late grandfather's house had already been sold, I laughed. It had to be a mistake. My parents would never do that, I said. There was a long silence before the man replied. They already signed everything. Everything. Except one document they didn't know existed. That forgotten piece of paper would change all of our lives. My name is Ethan Parker, and until that phone call, I believed my family was ordinary. Growing up, my parents always said that family came before money. They repeated it so often that I never questioned them. My grandfather, William Parker, lived in a beautiful countryside estate about 2 hours outside the city. It wasn't a mansion, but it was surrounded by acres of land, old oak trees, and a peaceful lake. To everyone else, it was valuable property. To me, it was home. Every summer, I stayed there while my parents worked. Grandpa taught me how to fish, repair old furniture, and plant apple trees. He often smiled and said, "People can lose money overnight, Ethan, but character? That's the only inheritance nobody can steal." I never forgot those words. When I turned 22, Grandpa became seriously ill. During one of my visits to the hospital, he asked everyone else to leave the room. Only the two of us remained. He reached for my hand. "I don't have much time left." I tried to stop him. "Grandpa, don't talk like that." He smiled gently. "Promise me you'll protect what I've worked for." "I promise." Then he whispered something that confused me. Not everyone in this family deserves my trust. Before I could ask what he meant, the nurses came back inside. Those were the last private words we ever shared. 3 weeks later, he passed away. The funeral was heartbreaking. My mother cried constantly. My father comforted relatives and handled all the paperwork. Everyone praised him for being responsible. I did too. At that time, I had no reason to doubt him. A week after the funeral, my parents told me there wasn't much inheritance left. "There were debts," my father explained. "The land wasn't worth keeping. It will probably be sold." I was devastated, but I trusted them. I didn't ask to see any documents. Why would I? They were my parents. Life slowly moved on. I focused on my career, rented a small apartment, and visited Grandpa's grave whenever I could. Almost a year passed. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I received a phone call from an unknown number. "Is this Ethan Parker?" "Yes." "My name is Michael Harris. I recently purchased William Parker's estate." For a moment, I couldn't understand what he was saying. "I'm sorry. Purchased?" "Yes. Your parents handled the sale several months ago." I felt my stomach tighten. There must be some mistake. "I don't think so." He paused before continuing. "I actually called because while renovating the house, we found several boxes with your name on them." My heart skipped. My name? Old photographs, journals, letters. They looked personal. I thanked him and drove to the estate the very next morning. The house looked different. The old porch had been painted. Grandpa's favorite wooden bench was gone. New owners were planting flowers where we used to sit together. It felt like someone had erased my childhood. Michael welcomed me kindly. "I'm sorry for your loss." He handed me 3 dusty boxes. "I thought these belonged to you." I thanked him sincerely. Before leaving, I couldn't stop myself from asking one question. "Can I ask how much the property sold for?" He hesitated. "I don't know if I should." "It's okay." Finally, he answered, "Just under $2 million." I froze. $2 million? My parents had told me the property was nearly worthless. They said there were debts. They said almost nothing remained. Suddenly, every conversation from the past year replayed inside my mind. Every excuse, every vague answer, every time they avoided talking about Grandpa's estate. For the first time in my life, I wondered if my own parents had lied to me. Driving home, I could barely keep my hands steady on the steering wheel. When I arrived, I opened the first dusty box. Inside were hundreds of old family photographs. The second contained Grandpa's journals. The third box held neatly organized folders tied together with faded blue ribbon. At the very bottom, hidden beneath decades of paperwork, I noticed a thick sealed envelope. Across the front, written in Grandpa's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words that made my blood run cold. For Ethan, open only if necessary. With trembling hands, I slowly broke the seal. I stared at the envelope for nearly a minute before opening it. My grandfather had never been a dramatic man. If he had written, open only if necessary, he must have known something terrible could happen after his death. With shaking hands, I unfolded the first page. It wasn't a letter. It was a certified legal document. At the top were the words, Declaration of Beneficial Ownership. I frowned. I had never heard of such a document before. Attached to it was a handwritten note. Ethan, if you are reading this, it means my wishes may have been ignored. I hope I'm wrong, but if I'm not, listen carefully. My heart began pounding. Many people believe a will is enough. It isn't. Too many families are destroyed by greed. That's why my attorney prepared additional documents to protect what belongs to you. I could barely breathe. The lake house and the surrounding land were always meant to become yours when you reached the age of 30. Until then, they were to be managed, but never sold without your written consent. I read the sentence again, then a third time. Never sold, without my written consent. I was 29. No one had ever asked for my permission. The next page contained copies of official signatures. My grandfather's, his attorney's, 2 witnesses. Everything appeared authentic. At the bottom was another handwritten sentence. Trust documents, not promises. I sat frozen on my apartment floor. For almost a year, I had blamed bad luck. Now I realized something far worse. Someone hadn't made a mistake. Someone had made a choice. I grabbed my phone and called my mother. She answered cheerfully. Hi, sweetheart. I know about Grandpa's house. Silence. What do you mean? I know it was sold. Another silence. Longer this time. We were going to tell you. When? She didn't answer. Instead, my father took the phone. Ethan, don't make this bigger than it is. Bigger than it is? I shouted. You told me the property had debts. It wasn't that simple. So explain it. We needed the money. The words hit me like a punch. We? Your mother and I had financial problems. What financial problems? He sighed. The business failed. I didn't even know you owned a business. It doesn't matter now. It matters because you sold Grandpa's life's work. His voice suddenly became cold. The property belonged to the family. No, I answered quietly. It belonged to Grandpa. He hung up. For the first time in my life, my own father had hung up on me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every memory felt different now. Every conversation with my parents suddenly sounded rehearsed. The next morning, I drove to the office, whose name appeared on the legal papers. The law firm still existed. The receptionist searched the archives before disappearing into another room. A few minutes later, an elderly attorney slowly walked toward me. Ethan Parker? Yes. He smiled sadly. You look exactly like your grandfather. You knew him? For over 30 years. I placed the document on his desk. Is this real? He adjusted his glasses. Then he nodded. Yes. My stomach tightened. So Grandpa really protected the property? He certainly tried. What does that mean? The attorney looked uncomfortable. I advised him to tell you immediately. He said he wanted to keep peace inside the family until you were older. I laughed bitterly. That didn't work. No. He opened an old filing cabinet. After several minutes, he returned carrying a thick folder. I believe these belong to you now. Inside were copies of every legal instruction my grandfather had signed during the last 2 years of his life. Letters, property maps, financial records, everything. Then I noticed something unexpected. There was a sealed USB drive attached to the folder. What is this? The attorney smiled. Your grandfather insisted we keep a recorded statement. A video? Yes. He said if anyone ignored his final wishes, the attorney paused. The truth should come directly from him. My hands started trembling again. We plugged the USB drive into his computer. The screen turned black. Then my grandfather appeared. Older, thinner, but smiling exactly the way I remembered. If you're watching this, Ethan, then someone I loved has disappointed me. Tears filled my eyes immediately. I pray I'm wrong. But if I'm not, don't fight because of anger. Fight because the truth deserves a voice. He slowly lifted a folder toward the camera. I have left more than a house. I have left evidence. My breathing stopped. Evidence? Against whom? Grandpa looked directly into the camera. If anyone sells this property before Ethan turns 30, they are knowingly violating my written instructions. He paused. And the person responsible cannot honestly say they didn't know. The room fell completely silent. The attorney looked at me. I looked back at the screen. My grandfather hadn't been guessing. He had been preparing. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just a family argument anymore. Someone had deliberately ignored his final wishes. Someone had signed papers they should never have signed. And I was finally holding the proof. I left the attorney's office carrying the folder as if it weighed 100 pounds. Not because of the papers, because of the truth inside them. For almost a year, I had believed my grandfather's wishes had simply faded away after his death. Instead, they had been ignored, deliberately. 3 days later, my lawyer filed a lawsuit asking the court to review the sale of the property. Within 48 hours, my parents were officially notified. My phone exploded with calls. I ignored every one of them. Then my mother appeared outside my apartment. The moment I opened the door, she burst into tears. Ethan, please don't do this. I looked at her quietly. I didn't start this. She reached for my hand. We're still your parents. I slowly pulled my hand away. And Grandpa was still your father. She had no answer. That evening, my father called. His voice sounded harder than ever. If you continue with this lawsuit, you'll destroy this family, I replied calmly. No, Dad. You destroyed it the day you signed those papers. He hung up without another word. A month later, the courtroom was full. My parents sat on one side. I sat on the other. Neither of us looked at each other. The buyer, Michael Harris, was also there. He had cooperated fully after learning about the hidden documents. I bought the property in good faith, he testified. I had no reason to believe Mr. Parker's wishes had been ignored. The judge nodded. Then my attorney stood. Your Honor, we'd like to present recorded evidence. The lights dimmed. Grandpa's video appeared on the courtroom screen. The room became completely silent. Everyone watched him speak. Everyone heard him clearly state that the property was never to be sold before my 30th birthday without my written consent. Then came the final sentence. If someone tells you I changed my mind, ask them to prove it. There is no such proof. When the video ended, nobody spoke, not even the judge. My father's lawyer stood and argued that financial hardship had forced the sale, but the judge interrupted him. Financial hardship does not erase written legal instructions. Then another surprise came. The attorney who had worked with my grandfather took the witness stand. He produced his original records. Every meeting, every signature, every instruction. He even showed certified letters that had been sent to my parents shortly after Grandpa's death, explaining the restrictions on the property. My father's face turned pale. My mother lowered her head. They had known all along. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't misunderstanding. It had been a choice. After several hours, the judge returned with the decision. The court finds that the sale violated the legal conditions established by William Parker. He paused. The transaction is declared invalid. I closed my eyes. For the first time in over a year, I could breathe. The judge continued. The buyer acted in good faith and will receive full financial compensation from those responsible. He looked directly at my parents. They knowingly proceeded despite clear legal restrictions. The courtroom remained silent. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around us. I ignored every microphone. I wasn't celebrating. There was nothing to celebrate. Winning the case hadn't brought my grandfather back. It hadn't repaired my family. Several weeks later, Michael Harris invited me to the property. The legal process had been completed. The house was finally mine. We walked through the front door together. Most of Grandpa's furniture had been carefully preserved. Even the old rocking chair still stood beside the fireplace. Michael smiled. I hoped you'd get it back. Thank you, I replied. You treated this place with respect. Before leaving, he handed me a small wooden box. We found this hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Inside was Grandpa's old pocket watch. Underneath it lay one final handwritten note. If you're reading this inside our home, then you protected what mattered. I was never trying to leave you a house, Ethan. I was trying to leave you the courage to stand for what is right, even when the people standing against you are your own family. Tears rolled down my face. Months passed. My parents tried many times to apologize. They admitted that they had convinced themselves they would somehow replace the money before I found out. Instead, one lie had become another, and another. Eventually, I met them for coffee. Not because everything was forgiven, but because carrying anger forever would only imprison me. I listened. They apologized. I accepted their apology. But I never forgot the lesson. Trust is like glass. Once shattered, it can be repaired, yet the cracks never completely disappear. Today, every spring, I sit on Grandpa's porch, overlooking the lake. His pocket watch rests in my hand. The apple trees we planted together are taller than the roof now. Sometimes I hear children laughing near the water. Sometimes the wind carries memories instead. People often ask me what inheritance I fought so hard to protect. They think the answer is land, or money, or a beautiful old house. They're wrong. The greatest inheritance my grandfather left me was the courage to defend the truth, even when telling it meant standing completely alone.